to call today's meeting, May 7th, of the Salina City Commission to order. And would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Jennings.
Here.
Commissioner Angel.
Here.
Commissioner Crawford. Here. Commissioner Householder.
Here.
Commissioner Shirley.
At this time, would those are available to rise, and we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. Thank you. This is our time for a citizens forum. Anybody that's here with us today that would like to speak on any items that are not on today's agenda, please come forward. We're going to ask that you speak your name and your address, and then any comments that you have for us.
My name is Jerry Brown. I live at 1215 Meyer Drive, Salina, and I want to thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. The topic or the issue that I'd like to bring up is, and I'll read a short memo that I've left with your secretary or your clerk. It's called Comparing Pedestrian Traffic Signal Times in Lawrence and Salina, Kansas. I produced a short video for YouTube sent to the commissioners to show that at the corner of Mass and 7th in Lawrence, that's by the Eldridge Hotel if you're familiar, the time allowed for the flashing pedestrian time is 20 seconds for their two-lane street compared to the 7 seconds signal at Crawford, Ohio, which is our busiest four-lane intersection. Each signal after the flashing pedestrian time then had a countdown time. In Lawrence, the pedestrians' time and the cars going in the same direction both start at the green light. They both start at the same time. That is when the 20-second pedestrian light starts. There is no button to press since it is set up to assume pedestrians are crossing at the start of the green light and the pedestrian light, which are at the same time. In Salina, the left turn lane for traffic coming from the other direction, this is at Crawford, Ohio, a busy intersection. The left turn lane for traffic coming from the other direction go first. Then the 7-second flashing pedestrian signal, followed by the 7-second flashing hand sign to no more people coming across. All the while, the right-hand turners going both directions are moving, or can move, sharing the limited pedestrian time. In the area bounded by Crawford on the north, the Levee on the east, Ohio on the west, and Albert Avenue, that's Dillon's Southgate, on the south, our only way out is to cross through the heavy four-lane traffic of Ohio. In that area, we have some citizens with special challenges, young and old citizens that cannot drive, people who can drive, but like me, choose at times to walk, run, or bike. Nationally, about 30% of us are in this category. Many of us in my area do not feel safe at Ohio and Crawford. In fact, my wife, who rides about 10 miles a day during the summer, will not try to cross the street at Crawford, Ohio. She just thinks it's dangerous. I have been told by city staff that Salina meets the standards for pedestrian crossing time, and I'm sure that it does. I would assume that Lawrence also meets the standards. However, it is my opinion that Salina is meeting minimum standards for pedestrian crossing time, while Lawrence is exceeding those standards. I would hope there is something that can be done to make our heavy traffic sections or intersections not only feel safer, but actually be safer for pedestrians in Salina. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any other citizens that would like to speak during public comment this Seeing none, we'll move on to awards and proclamations.
Item 4.1, the month of May 2012 as Lupus Awareness Month in the City of Salina. Karen Humphreys, Lupus Support Group Coordinator, will read the proclamation.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Lupus Awareness Month Proclamation. Whereas each year the Lupus Foundation of America designates May as National Lupus Awareness Month to show support for the estimated 1.5 million Americans who have lupus. Whereas lupus can affect virtually every organ system in the body, including the skin, the lungs, heart, kidney, brain, and can also cause seizures, strokes, heart attacks, miscarriages, and organ failure. Whereas, while lupus strikes mostly women between the ages of 15 and 44, lupus also occurs in children, teens, and men. No one is safe from lupus. African Americans, Hispanic Latinos, Asians, and Native Americans are 2 to 3 times more likely to develop lupus, a disparity that remains unexplained. Whereas lupus can be particularly difficult to diagnose because its symptoms are similar to those of many other illnesses. Major gaps exist in understanding the causes and the consequences of lupus. More than half of all the people with lupus take 4 or more years and visit 3 or more doctors before obtaining a correct diagnosis. Whereas increased public awareness, education, and research are key to winning the battle against lupus. Whereas 14,000 Kansans are affected by lupus. Now, therefore, I, Norman M. Jennings, Mayor of the City of Salina, Kansas, do hereby proclaim the month of May as Lupus Awareness Month in Salina, Kansas. I urge each of our citizens to observe this month by educating themselves on symptoms and the impact of lupus, and joining with the Kansas chapter of the Lupus Foundation of America in supporting programs such as research, education, and community service. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the City of Salina, Kansas, to be affixed this month of May in the year 2012.
Excellent. Are there any activities you'd like to let the citizens know about?
On May 7th, we are having, it starts at the Rendezvous Bar down on Santa Fe. We're having a motorcycle poker run. It runs through Abilene, the huge city of Detroit, and then to Bennington and then back to Salina. There's also going to be an auction and a dinner on that same day. And then there are different areas around Kansas that are having walkathons. And May 10th is World Lupus Day. Everybody is supposed to observe that day by wearing purple.
Even the KU people.
Probably so.
Excellent. Anything else?
No, that's it.
I have a
Thank you.
signed copy of the proclamation. If
Item 4.2, the week of May 6th through the 12th, 2012, as National Nurses Week in the City of Salina. Dr. Janice Spikes, Professor of Nursing at Kansas Wesleyan University, will read the proclamation.
Good
Good
afternoon.
afternoon. Proclamation of the City of Salina. Whereas, since 1965, the International Council of Nurses, ICN, has celebrated May 12th as International Nurses Day. Whereas, since 1974, National Nurse Week has been celebrated in the United States by proclamation of President Richard Nixon on May 6th, the birthday of Florence Nightingale, the founder of nursing, through May 12th. Whereas, since 1981, the American Nurses Association, ANA, along with various other nursing organizations, celebrated May 6th as National Recognition Day for Nurses. Whereas, there are approximately 3 million registered nurses, RNs, in the United States and approximately 36,000 registered nurses in Kansas. Whereas, there are approximately 60,000 professionally active RNs who are members of the American Nurses Association, and approximately 1,114 of whom are members of the Kansas State Nurses Association. Whereas, the Kansas State Nurses Association was founded in 1912, and in 1913, nurses were required to be registered with the state to practice nursing. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Norman M. Jennings, Mayor of the City of Salina, do hereby proclaim the week of May 6th to May 12th, 2012, to be the National Nurses Week in Salina, recognizing registered nurses and celebrating the 100th anniversary of KSNA. In witness thereof, I have hereto set my hand and caused the seal of Salina, Kansas, to be affixed this 7th day of May, 2012.
Dr. Spikes, do you have any events you'd like to let us know about?
All over town this week, there will be celebrations. The hospital has recognized nurses, the various doctors' offices has recognized nurses, and Kansas Wesleyan University is recognizing nurses and nursing students this week. And in October, at the State Nurses Convention, there will be a bigger celebration of the 100th anniversary of KSNA.
Super.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a signed copy of the proclamation for you.
Item 4.3, the week of May 5th through the 13th, 2012, as Travel and Tourism Week in the City of Salina. Sylvia Rice, Kathy Tolbert, and Michael Brungart will read the proclamation.
Good
Good
afternoon.
afternoon.
National Travel and Tourism Week, May 5th through the 13th, proclamation. Whereas travel matters to the nation's economic prosperity and its image abroad, to business wealth and to individual travelers. Whereas meetings, events, and incentive travel are core business functions that help companies strengthen business performance, align and educate employees and customers, and reward business accomplishments. Whereas leisure travel accounts for more than 75% of all trips taken in the U.S. and spurs countless benefits to travelers' creativity, cultural awareness, education, happiness, productivity, relationships, and wellness. Whereas travel to and within the United States provides significant economic benefits for the nation, with $813 billion spent directly by travelers in 2011 and an additional $1.1 trillion spurred in other industries.
Whereas travel is among the largest private sector employers in the United States, supporting 14.4 million jobs in 2011, including 7.5 million directly in the travel industry and 6.9 million in other industry. Whereas travelers spending directly generated tax revenues of $124 billion for federal, state, and local governments, funds used to support essential services and programs. Whereas tourism is a $5.46 billion industry in Kansas, creating 148,945 jobs and a $2.56 billion in wages and salaries. Whereas tourism expenditures generated a relief of $876 in state and local taxes per household in Kansas.
Whereas data gathered by Kansas Travel and Tourism Division estimates tourism expenditures in Saline County to exceed $150 million annually, and more than $20 million is generated in taxable hotel room revenue alone. Whereas more than 2,000 Salinans are employed at hotels, restaurants, attractions, fuel centers, and retail stores due to the commerce generated through tourism. Whereas travel is a catalyst that moves the national economy forward. Now, therefore, I, Norm Jennings, do hereby proclaim May 5th through the 13th, 2012 as Travel and Tourism Week in Salina, Kansas, and urge the citizens of Salina to join me in this special observance with appropriate events and commemorations.
And what events do you have planned?
First, I'd invite you all to like us on Facebook, like Visit Salina on Facebook. We've unveiled today our new promotion that is entitled Set Your Feet Loose in Salina. As per usual, we've dedicated some time to putting together a T-shirt in commemoration of National Travel and Tourism Week. I want to mention that this promotion is put together to encourage all Salinans to get out, get their feet moving in Salina, and see what it is that we have in this community that makes this a great destination. Document that visually through photography and submit that back to us. And we'll be doing prizes throughout the next several weeks. I'm joined today also, in addition to Michael and Kathy, with many members of the tourism industry representing attractions, performance venues, cultural events, hotels, volunteers that work with us very closely. I want to thank all of them for joining us as well. And we expect all of you to get out, set your feet loose in Salina, and enjoy with us what it is that we have to sell to our volunteers and our visitors.
Sounds like a lot of fun. Thank you. I have a signed copy of the proclamation.
Item 4.4, the day of May 15, 2012 as Peace Officers Memorial Day, and the week of May 13th through the 19th, 2012 as National Police Week in the city of Salina. Officer Chad Burr will read the proclamation.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Proclamation of the City of Salina, Kansas. Whereas the Congress and the President of the United States have designated May 15th as Peace Officers Memorial Day and the week in which May 15th falls as National Police Week. And whereas law enforcement officers play an important role in safeguarding rights, freedoms, safety, and security of the citizens of our community. And whereas the City of Salina desires to honor the valor, dedication, service, and sacrifice of its own peace officers, 4 of whom have been killed in the line of duty. And whereas 173 officers were killed in the line of duty in 2011 and more than 59,000 were assaulted, our community joins with other cities and towns to honor all peace officers everywhere. Now, therefore, I, Norman M. Jennings, Mayor of the City of Salina, do hereby proclaim the week of May 13 to May 19, 2012 to be Police Week and call upon our citizens in this community to especially honor and show our sincere appreciation for the police officers of this city by deed, remark, and attitude. I call upon our citizens to make every effort to express their thanks to our officers who make it possible for us to leave our homes and families in safety each day and return to our homes knowing they are protected by officers willing to sacrifice their lives if necessary to guard our loved ones, property, and government against all who would violate the law. Signed the 7th day of May, 2012, at the City of Salina, State of Kansas. In witness thereof, the seal and signature of the city are affixed. Thank you.
Excellent. Are there any events planned?
Yes, sir. May 15th at 8 a.m. at the Jerry Ivan Memorial Park, we'll have the Peace Officers Memorial Service.
Super. I have a signed copy of the proclamation.
Item 4.5, acceptance of Phase 3 of the Greater Salina Community Foundation Nutrition and Physical Activity Grant for the Levee Hike and Bike Trail, project number 122915.
Good afternoon. I'm Melanie Terrell, and I'm here as a member of the Greater Salina Community Foundation Board. Probably familiar with the foundation, which was established in 1999, and this is the 13th year with assets now totaling more than $78 million. And since the inception, we've awarded more than $27 million in grants from a variety of funds. The foundation provides a vehicle for individuals, families, businesses, and organizations to establish charitable funds for permanent endowed giving in our community. And your grant is a part of our Nutrition and Physical Activity Initiative, which fits right in with the Chamber's theme of moving your feet. It's aimed at creating a healthier community by emphasizing better nutrition and increased physical activity. This is the final year of a 3-year initiative where approximately $230,000 of grant funds were available for applications directly related to nutrition or physical activity, meeting the goals of a plan developed by the Nutrition and Physical Activity Coalition in Salina. Funding for this project comes from the Kansas Health Foundation out of Wichita. It's my pleasure to present a check in the amount of $32,000 on behalf of the foundation to the City of Salina for the Levee Trail Extension Project. This is the final year of a 3-year grant totaling $108,900. We look forward to continuing to work with the City of Salina on the Nutrition and Physical Activity Initiative, and thank you for giving us some time today. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, you'll take your check.
If you just want to sign that over to me.
Thank you very much. Now we move on to public hearings and items scheduled for a certain time.
Item 5.1, public comment regarding the proposed use of the 2012 Edward Bryan Memorial Justice Assistance Grant Program funds.
Chief Hill. I believe this is your item. Okay, yes. She just announced item 5.1. Yep.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, the City of Salina has been awarded $19,397 in fiscal year 2012 Justice Assistance Grant funding. This is administered by the U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Justice Programs, Bureau of Justice Assistance, and it is awarded directly to jurisdictions based upon a formula that's based upon population served and FBI violent crime statistics. We've been awarded just a little over 19,000, and ideally, if we didn't have a violent crime, then we should get 0, and I'd be happy to receive that. As Saline County has neither the population base or the violent crime rate to receive a direct award, we have once again been certified as a disparate jurisdiction, and we must share the award with Saline County. We've reached agreement again with Sheriff Kokonowski, and he's agreed to accept the JAG award in the amount of $2,910, and the city will receive $16,487. Under the requirements of the grant, an applicant must make the grant available for public review by the governing body and ensure the public has the opportunity to comment, and I've attached the grant documents with the blue sheet. Staff proposes designating equipment designation of WatchGuard digital mobile vehicle video cameras as the program purpose for which JAG funds will be used. The JAG will be used to acquire 4 police cruiser video cameras, which will be purchased based on the state of Kansas bid. On a fiscal note, the total cost of acquisition exceeds the grant amount by $1,825. Funding for the additional WatchGuard cameras is currently contained in the police budget, and the monies will be paid from the other equipment line item. And by acquiring these cameras at this time, we will completely digitize our vehicle fleet, and will be no more VHS cameras, which have been problematic. Plus, the VHS is kind of old and difficult to store when you're recording basically every contact and every stop. Staff's recommended action would be to authorize the mayor to sign the memorandum of understanding with Saline County. 2, the electronic submittal of the JAG program application as presented in your packet. And 3, authorize the acquisition of 4 WatchGuard brand digital mobile cameras.
Excellent. Any questions of the chief? Thank you, Chief. Is there any public comment?
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Bring it back to the commission for discussion and action.
Mayor, I move that we authorize the mayor to sign yourself the memorandum of understanding, the electronic submittal of the JAG program grant application as presented, and 3, the acquisition of 4 WatchGuard brand digital mobile cameras.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to allow myself as mayor to sign the memorandum of understanding, the electronic submittal of the JAG program grant application as presented, and the acquisition of 4 WatchGuard brand digital mobile cameras. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. We now move on to the consent agenda.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of April 23rd, 2012. Item 6.2, authorize purchase of a programmable logic controller for the water treatment plant to R.E. Padadri Company, Incorporated, in the amount of $15,725. Item 6.3, award a contract for the water service line installations, project number 122921, to Mid-Kansas Underground, Incorporated, in the amount of $386,500. Item 6.4, acceptance of public sidewalk easement dedication on the south side of Key Avenue on Lot 1, Block 2, in the replat of Lambert's Addition. Item 6.5, resolution number 126901, authorizing the submittal of an application to the Kansas Department of Transportation for use of safe routes to school federal funds, and authorize the city manager to sign the application. Item 6.6, Resolution number 126900, authorizing a license agreement with Salina Regional Health Center to allow the installation of a private fiber optic cable within the public right-of-way of North Oakdale Avenue and East Iron Avenue. Item 6.7, Resolution number 126903, authorizing an agreement for the purchase of the 2011 Sculpture Tour Salina People's Choice Award.
Are there any items on the consent agenda that Commissioner wishes to have removed? I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries 4-0. We now move on to development business.
Item 7.1, first reading ordinance number 10637, annexing a segment of Magnolia Road from the flood control levee to 300 feet east of Markley Road, and Markley Road from the intersection with Magnolia Road north to the existing city limits.
Mr. Andrew.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. This is Phase 2 of a proposed annexation of East Magnolia Road and extending up to Markley Road and the area in question you see on the aerial photo here, and you have a map of that in your packet. The shaded area there represents the corridor that would be annexed into the city limits, and we believe there's a general consensus that this stretch of roadway carries predominantly urban traffic between two sections of the city of Salina. It just happens to pass through an area that has unplatted and unannexed property. And the reason this was done in two phases is the area west of the levee, not pictured there, the city of Salina had ownership of the right-of-way, either acquired or already dedicated through platting. And from there east and on to the north, the abutting owners in Saline County own to the center of the road. There was a public hearing held by the Planning Commission, and then I've had discussions with each of them explaining that the only change to their property would be that the portion occupied by the roadway will in the future be plowed by the city, striped by the city, ditches mowed by the city, and if there are traffic or law enforcement issues, responded to by city. But as to their own private property, that will continue to be under the jurisdiction of Saline County and Saline County law enforcement. So the fiscal note or fiscal impact to this is that we'll be taking on responsibility for about 1.2 miles of additional roadway, including traffic signage, markings, snow removal, mowing, and maintenance of roadside ditches. And again, all of the owners on the west and north side in Saline County abutting this have been notified and consulted, and they have no objections to the city taking over this jurisdiction and also annexing that strip into the city. The other change that would or should occur out there is today there's a blue and white county sign at the corner of Markley and Magnolia, and that would be changed out to green and white, indicating that those are city street intersections. With that, I'd be open to any questions you have.
Any questions of staff?
I just am curious why we're going past the intersection 300 feet.
I think part of that was just that was considered part of the intersection approach for safety and law enforcement purposes. And so in terms of street lights, signage, other things, that 300 feet was considered to be taking in the full intersection. Then from there east, it would remain within Saline County.
So is that just to include that? Is there a turn lane there, or a right turn?
There is not a turn lane. There is a street sign there, a street light there. There's also a siren there for that notifies or goes off for emergency management.
A street light at Magnolia and Markley? I was looking
Yes.
at Magnolia and Markley.
There's a street light at Magnolia and Markley.
Magnolia and Markley.
I'm talking.
That's what I'm thinking of.
Not a traffic
oh,
signal.
Okay.
A
You
street,
just mean
a street
illuminating
light that
light.
illuminates the intersection.
Okay.
Yes, not a traffic light.
I was, well, okay. Where am I?
I don't pay attention
Yeah,
to
we're-
it either. Yeah.
No,
many
no
times
immediate
have you
need to
run
put a
that?
traffic signal there.
Thank you, Dan.
Don't add. Yeah.
Got it. Okay,
So
thank you.
the 300 foot is just to make sure that the entire intersection is within the confines of the city for maintenance and enforcement purposes.
Any other questions?
If not, thank you.
Thank you. Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission for further discussion and action.
Mayor, I'd move that we accept ordinance number 12-10637.
Second.
We have a motion and a second accepting ordinance number 12-10637, annexing a segment of Magnolia Road from the flood control levee to 300 feet east of Markley Road, and Markley Road from that intersection until it, on Magnolia north until the city limits of Salina. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. And we move on to administration.
Item 8.1, set a hearing date to hear an appeal of the Planning Commission's failure to approve the conditional use application CU03-2B filed by the Salina Regional Health Center.
Mr. Andrew, back up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. The purpose of this item is for you to see if it's agreeable to you to set a hearing date to consider an appeal of the Planning Commission's failure to approve a amended conditional use permit application filed by the Salina Regional Health Center. They had submitted a request to amend the existing conditional use permit that allowed for the Hospice Center of Salina to locate on Holly Lane by adding additional office and clinical space for Viridian Behavioral Health, and also to construct additional parking there. The Planning Commission conducted a public hearing on that, and at the conclusion of the hearing, the motion to approve their application failed, and the Salina Regional Health Center has filed an appeal of that decision. And the recommended action we're asking for today is to acknowledge the receipt of a written appeal filed by Salina Regional Health Center, which is attached to your packet there. Because the action of the Planning Commission was a failure to approve, the action's basis is not clearly articulated in their motion, and so we would recommend that you refer this back to the Planning Commission's May 15th agenda to add some clarification to their reasons. And then we recommend that you set May 21st as the hearing date to consider the information, testimony, and minutes of the Planning Commission's public hearing and decision before you on the 21st. We also wanted to add a note here that this falls within the category of our quasi-judicial land use matters, so the parties involved have been contacted and advised that what needs to be presented on the 21st and not beforehand. And so both parties have been advised that they shouldn't be contacting any commissioners ahead of that meeting. So with that, I'd be answering any questions that you have, but those are the three items. Would be acknowledging that we have received that appeal, referring this item back to the Planning Commission to further articulate their reasons, and then, if it's agreeable to you, setting May 21st as the date to consider that appeal.
Okay. Mr. Bingston, would these be three separate actions?
I don't believe that would be necessary. I think in this case, a single motion would suffice.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff?
Thank you.
Is there any public comment? I'll bring it back to the commission for discussion and action.
Mayor, I move we refer this item back to the Planning Commission meeting on May 15th, 2012, agenda to further articulate the reasons for the Planning Commission's failure to approve the Salina Regional Health Center's application on April 17th, 2012, and to set May 21st as a hearing date to consider all the information and testimony of the Planning Commission's public hearing and decision on the Salina Regional Health Center's amended conditional use permit application.
Second.
We have a motion that we would acknowledge this written appeal to the Salina Regional Health Center and refer it back to the Planning Commission for their May 15th meeting so that they can report back to us with a public hearing date set on May 21st to discuss all the information, testimony, and meeting of the Planning Commission hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries 4-0.
Item 8.2, Resolution Number 126886, setting forth findings and determinations on the advisability of and authorizing the construction of improvements in the Magnolia Hill Estates addition.
Mr. Stack.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. All right, this is a resolution of advisability for Magnolia Hills Estates Phase 3. The Magnolia Hills Estates subdivision was platted in the mid-2000s and has been steadily developing over the last few years, and phases 1 and 2 are close enough to where the developers have approached the city to develop Phase 3. Phase 3 basically is 9 lots to the south there, as shown on the map. Kelly Dunn, Stan Byquist, and James Markle are the owners, and Kelly's the president of Magnolia Hills Incorporated. But it's basically just extending the street. Wayne, how many feet? 700 or 800 feet, basically to the south. Is that right?
It's approximately 450 or 460 feet.
Basically into that green line on the bottom, which sewer, water, and then 9 lots will be the new lots that will be developable, as Wayne is showing there on the south end. They're slowly working their way around based on the market, and they feel like this is advisable. Most of the lots in that subdivision are indeed either purchased or building on. They have a few for sale, but few enough to where it's time to work on the next phase. The petition is signed by the owners of record and meets the statutory requirements for sufficiency. The specials are currently estimated to be around $31,942, so that's a current estimate. That includes some of the contingencies of construction, so if it comes in construction-wise okay, then it's going to be pretty close to the 30,000 mark, but it's a little over 30 at this point. Definitely the developers and the property owners have the option to pay those off ahead of time, or they're a 15-year bond issuance that would occur next spring. At this time, I would entertain questions.
Any questions of staff?
And Kelly and Stan are here today if you have any questions for them as well.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank Wayne Nelson and Mike Schrag, and I'm the presenter, but they do a lot of the behind-the-scenes work to keep these projects moving. So, and the patience of the developers to work through the development agreement. It's the first time they've done this, so they're excited to see how it works.
Good.
Thank you.
Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission for any further discussion and action.
Mayor, I move that we adopt Resolution 12-6886.
We have a motion to approve Resolution 12-6886, setting forth the findings and determinations.
We've got a different one.
I think that's a different.
Yeah. Is it 6886 or is it 6902?
Yeah, hey.
Our agenda has one number, our blue sheet has a different number.
I think the blue sheet's probably
6902?
6902.
Mayor, I move that we adopt Resolution 12-6902.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve Resolution 12-6902, approving the advisability and authorization related to the establishment of a special improvement district for streets, drainage, water, and sanitary improvements to Magnolia Hills Estates Phase 3. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries 4-0.
Item 8.3, award a bid for the State Street Guardrail Replacement, project number 092785.
Mr. Stack.
Yes, back again. Familiar item. From a few weeks ago, we did talk about this project, State Street Guardrail Replacement. City Commission recommended we try to look at some other options, and so we did. We went back and talked to Salina County, see kind of how they deal with guardrail projects, and then as well as KDOT to see they have quite a few guardrail projects around the state. And really, we're just unable to figure out a way to package them as a partnership or in a way that would, we felt like, gain us a whole lot more value or savings, I guess. This project is unique enough to where it's just going to be a challenge to get a contractor in here for very much less price. Looking at that guardrail right there is a good picture of what it looks like. It's, I don't know if you'd say functioning, but it's close. It's leaning over pretty well. It's been hit. It's served its purpose. The problem with doing these type of projects is it has to attach to that reinforced concrete box, and that is very labor intensive. And so when we talked to Smoky Hill with their subcontractors, they were the bidder the last time. The prices were fairly similar. This time they at least had two bidders, which was helpful, but the prices came in similar both times. And Smoky Hill basically said it's just the work of hanging off the side of that thing to drill into the side of that box is a challenge. You have to get either a cherry picker or scaffolding to hang over the side. So it's very labor intensive. So as far as comparing these costs with normal guardrail costs in the state and in the county, it's not really a fair comparison. So that was what they said was the main reason. And we talked to our city staff. We thought, well, maybe our city staff could do it. And we could, but it would take a lot of time for our guys. And the guardrail guys at least are used to working around bridges, have the equipment to do it, so they could do it. It's going to take them longer. Most of the guardrail contractors, there's about 4 in the state that we talk to with KDOT, and they're used to working on highways, blowing and going. They've got a machine that, they can do it fast, and that's what they like to do. So when you have to pull them off one of their jobs for this, there's just a premium involved. So I guess that's a long story for saying we don't feel like there's any better way or any more savings that we feel like we could realize at this time. And basically being on notice now, I mean, we've come to the commission enough to where if there was ever a problem here that we feel like we're even more at risk than we were if we'd not said anything. So it's kind of, we're to the point where we feel like we just need to replace it and get it done. So we were able to realize a little bit of savings. We're partnering with them, with our traffic control crews. We felt like that was something we can do. Our traffic control guys can do it. That'll save some dollars. We can do a little bit of construction staking, saving a little bit of dollars. It's not a lot, but it's enough to where, all right, we've got a little skin in the game in this case, and I feel like this is as good as we can do at this time. And Smoky Hill's a good local contractor. They kind of pride themselves on doing these kind of projects and want to do it right for the city. So we don't typically, they're not somebody that's gouging the city. It's what it's going to cost. So that's they've been low bidders on many projects and done a great job for us. So we, at this point, we recommend awarding it to Smoky Hill and moving on down the road with this. Any questions?
Excellent. Well, you can't out-talk a picture. It's nice to see these pictures, I guess, to really see the magnitude of what we're talking about.
That does help.
Yeah.
Is that going to be any higher
Yes.
or taller?
Yes.
It looks like it needs to be.
That's correct. That is one of the main reasons it's a problem is right now when the roads get overlaid and built up over the years, it really doesn't even meet any kind of requirements now for height. So it's going to be the right height. Wayne, could you go down to the bottom picture? If you scroll, I put a picture at least of what a guardrail should look like and how high it should be. There it is. There's one on Crawford. That actually is the 2.5 feet off the ground that it's supposed to be. That's one that looks pretty good and serves its purpose and is functioning as it should. So that's just an example of what it'll look like when we get done.
I agree with Mayor Jennings that pictures are worth 1,000 words.
I apologize.
Really
I didn't
helps
do this
a lot.
earlier. I should have. Mike Frazier said, let's get some pictures up there and take a look. I thought, well, you ever drive by it, you can see it. But yeah, pictures right here help. So I will do that from now on. Thank you.
There better be a cherry picker out there. If I go up there as a guy on a ladder, I'm going to be really mad that, oh, it's going to take some special equipment. And I go out there as a guy up there on a 8-foot ladder drilling into that thing. I'd be like, they needed $64,000 for what? So,
Well, I would hate to
I
go
tell you, this
over
looks like
that.
a project I could do. I think I got some extra. I got a ladder. I got some metal
See.
stakes.
Let me see how many bolts, core drills through 50-year-old concrete
Oh,
and
yeah.
rebar that you have
I think it's
to
probably
do.
going to break apart when they go to drill into it.
It's
We'll
going to be
replace the whole thing.
a serious hammer drill. The guy on that hammer drill is going to be tired.
My 19-volt thing isn't going to work?
No, it wouldn't.
All right, we better just give it to
You need
these.
some leverage, too.
Better just give it to these guys.
Thanks for going back and looking at it again.
Yeah, it
Thank
does
you.
look better.
Yes, thank you.
Is there any public comment on this item? We'll bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor, I move we approve project number 092785 to Smoky Hill LLC at a reduced bid amount of $64,400, 3% construction contingency.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to award project number 092785 to Smoky Hill LLC at a reduced bid amount of $64,400 with a 3% construction contingency of $1,932. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries 4-0.
Item 8.4, resolution number 126904, setting forth findings and determinations on the advisability of and authorizing the construction of improvements in the Stone Lake subdivision.
Mr. Scribe?
Thank you, Mayor. This is also a special assessment like Magnolia Hills, but it is a little bit more unique, both compared to Magnolia Hills and compared to other projects we've done, as well as projects that bond council's worked on. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time going over the details. I'm going to try to balance the detail that you need versus giving you too much detail as I do that. The item before you is approval of a resolution of advisability as well as authorization of the creation of a special assessment district and authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with the developers, which are one entity with two corporate names, Sparrowhawk Land LLC and Allsop Sand Inc. The subdivision has been platted. It's a fairly unique plat in that it contains large, exceptionally large estate lots that adjoin the lake that was previously a sand pit. And so that contributes to some of the challenges that we faced in terms of trying to develop the special assessments that apply in this case. Along with the more typical, there's also typically sized residential lots in this same first phase on the opposite side of the street, as well as commercial lots adjoining Ohio Street. And I believe in this particular phase, there's one mixed-use residential lot or multifamily lot as well. The petition that you've been provided is the result of quite a bit of coordination between city staff, the developer, and bond council, and it takes into account the proposed on-site and off-site improvements that would be involved. The development is located in the northeast quadrant of Ohio and Schilling around the sand pit, and some of the water and sewer improvements provide benefit outside the proposed development, and those proportional costs have been accounted for as city at large expenses, and that's a common practice that's provided for by statute and something that we do on a regular basis. Additionally, then, as we reviewed the proposed subdivision, staff identified the need for an extension of an 8-inch water line from the first phase to the south to connect to a Schilling water main. And as a result, we worked with the developer and we've proposed this as a cost recovery format for that 8-inch water line, meaning that as that phase develops and as those building permits are pulled, that's when we'll be able to recover those costs on a lot-by-lot basis. So the costs associated with that portion are cost recovery, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. When we calculated the initial allocations like we would in a regular subdivision, we found them to be exceptionally large in the estate lots, such that they weren't acceptable both in terms of dollar value, just in terms of what the market might bear. And so after considerable work on the part of the developer, they came up with a proposed assessment methodology that smoothed out some of those costs. And that also is varying from the state statute or the provided processes by statute, and as a result makes the bond issuance for this project taxable rather than tax exempt. That's permissible, and we work with bond counsel to structure all the documents accordingly.
So our bond underwriters have estimated that the taxable rate for these bonds will be 0.5 to 0.75 percentage point higher than a typical tax-exempt bond issue. The developers are aware of that and still feel like that rate is favorable to compared to what they could get on the private market. So as I mentioned in the blue sheet, the proposed method is very detailed and complex, and I'll try to go through it in a step-by-step manner and keep it kind of brief. The first few steps are typical of any special assessment. The improvements are identified, whether they be water, sewer, street, etc., and then the benefit areas associated with each one of those improvements is identified, and those actually get broken into sub-areas. For example, the 12-inch water main on the north and 12-inch water main on the south are oversized to provide flow for the whole development, so that has a broader benefit area than the 8-inch main within the proposed first phase. Similarly, there's a boulevard entrance proposed that benefit's been assessed against the entire development, where the standard-sized residential street is applied to the adjoining lots. So then each benefit area or sub-area is reviewed in light of the benefit to the development as well as the city at large. And if there's identified benefit to the city at large, that's split out between the city at large portion and the development. The next step then is once those costs applicable to the development are identified, the costs are proportionally allocated to each lot. That's the typical special assessment process, and if we stop there, that would result in assessments that were exceptionally large to the estate lots. The additional two steps that the developer proposed was to take 85% of that calculated assessment and call that the base assessment applicable to each lot. And so every lot's carrying 85% of the normal calculated assessment. Then the remaining 15% was essentially pooled and spread out over the entire development, not just the proposed first phase, but the entire development. And that then resulted in sharing those costs over the development and smoothing those. I'm jumping around on you just a little bit, but if you were to look at the distribution of costs in the documentation, I selected lot 12 as a representative lot. It's 0.328 acres, so almost a third of an acre. That's kind of a standard residential lot. That cost that was carried forward was $1,378.30. Or their total specials were $1,378.30. So that combined the shared benefit of the boulevard and some of those other improvements, as well as the smoothing of the additional assessments across the entire development. So each lot varies depending on its acreage, but that's a representative number. While the proposed approach is exceptionally complex, it results in assessments that are more in keeping with other assessments in the community and makes them more acceptable in the local real estate market. And I said that it should be noted that it does place some of the assessment on the lots in future phases. In addition to meeting the statutory requirements for a valid benefit petition, the developer's request also specifically utilizes the additional provisions in the statutes that allow for disproportionate assessments on the basis that 100% of the property owners have consented on the front end of creating this district. So due to the disproportional assessments is why the bonds will be taxable rather than tax exempt. The resolution before you makes findings about the advisability of the proposed improvements, and that is a discretionary determination to be made by the City Commission. And it can and should take into account the special assessments proposed. As a basis of comparison, the proposed assessments in this development range from $24,700 for a more typical residential lot to $34,800 for the estate lots. And that is comparable to some of the other developments we've done. Grand Prairie, as an example, got into the low to mid-30s on the basis that those were estate lots backing up to the golf course. The special assessments for Magnolia Hills that were just approved were $31,942 as another basis of comparison. In terms of conformance with the strategic plan, we identified a number of things, making the community exciting to live in economically and socially, providing a quality of life, encouraging and supporting industrial, economic, and market-based development, mixed-use quality development, high-quality services, growth and development policies that are updated to reflect current conditions. And I would tell you, as a side note, as we worked to try to understand and then implement the complexity of this project, we certainly took the attitude that this is providing customer service. This was an exceptional project, but frankly, the results surprised me in terms of how they were able to smooth the cost. So the entire project is estimated to cost $1,460,979. $59,507.98 of that would be city at large. $67,907.19 of that will be cost recovery associated with the proposed South Waterline Loop, and the remaining $1,333,563.80 would be assessed against the development. And the project's likely to be temporarily financed with temporary notes enrolled into long-term bonds, most likely in 2013. We've identified 3 possible actions for you. One would be to vote to approve the resolution and authorize the mayor to execute the improvement district development agreement. The second option would be to provide additional direction to city staff about the approach or methodology and ask us that we come back with the appropriate revisions. A third would be to conclude that the proposed improvements and special assessments are not advisable and vote to deny the resolution that's before you. As a summary of the unique features, and I've touched on this a little bit, but just to be clear, the improvements are to be installed by the contractors hired by the developer, with the developer then being reimbursed once the improvements are in and finally accepted by the city. That's fairly unique, but that's something that we're doing more commonly now, so I wouldn't say that it's truly unique to this development. As I mentioned, the developer is electing to propose customized special assessments in order to create allocations that are more in keeping with the market, and that is legal, but it makes the bonds taxable rather than tax exempt. The interest rate is still favorable compared to the private market, and that cost is incorporated into the special assessment, so it's not a cost that we would bear. And then as part of the customized assessments, some of those costs for the improvements in Phase 1 are spread across the entire development. I do have one other item to call to your attention, and that is a change in some of the verbiage that represents an amendment from what was distributed to you on Friday. And if need be, the city clerk has this wording if you feel that you need to formally make the amendment. But in the preliminary engineering report, in the cost recovery section on page 2, we've deleted paragraphs 3 and 4 and replaced them with text that reads, "The cost recovery area is currently used for agricultural purposes, and for so long as the cost recovery area is used for agricultural purposes, it will not connect to or benefit from the 8-inch waterline improvements. The cost recovery area is expected to develop incrementally over a period of time. Before any building permits are issued for any property within the cost recovery area, the city shall impose a cost recovery charge against such property. The capital cost recovery charge is imposed per the Improvement District Development Agreement and is estimated to be approximately $67,907.19. Such costs will be initially paid by the city." The reason for that change, the prior language contemplated a cost recovery ordinance, which is our past approach, but bond council has identified that we may not need to be as formal as a home rule ordinance for cost recovery. We may be able to address it through the development agreement, which that language is in there. So essentially, this language keeps our options open as we go forward in terms of the method that we recover those costs. It does not take away the fact that there will be cost recovery in one form or another. So lastly, if you agree that if you concur that the values and methods of assessment are appropriate and advisable, then it's recommended that you would act on option 1, voting to approve the resolution and the determinations and authorize the mayor to execute the development agreement. Representative of the developers here in the audience, Jim Mays, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have, and I'll rely on him heavily if needed.
So one of the fundamental differences with this methodology is that the certain portion, 15%, is spread out through the entire addition.
Correct.
Okay. Whereas maybe like the prior item that came forward was just for a section of that development, all costs going to the foreseeable future developments. Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Do we have any public comment on this item? Bring it back to the commission for further discussion and action.
Mayor, I move that we approve Resolution 12-6904. with the amendment as read by Mr. Scragg.
Second.
We now have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 12-6904 as amended by Deputy City Manager Mike Scragg. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries 4-0.
Item 8.5, first reading ordinance number 10,638, amending section 25-155 of the Salina Code pertaining to outdoor discharge of air guns, air rifles, bow and arrows, slingshots, paintball guns, and BB guns.
This be Mr. Andrew.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. You may wonder why I'm standing up here again, and sometimes I do too. This actually started out as a land use issue and ended up, as you can see in Section 25, which is basically part of Salina's criminal code. And the criminal code prohibits the shooting or discharge of air guns, air rifles, bows and arrows, slingshots, or paintball guns or BB guns anywhere within the city limits, except if you're inside a building. And I'm aware of at least one indoor paintball range that was rather short-lived in the mid-1990s, and that is the only one that I'm aware of, and it was indoors. And some of the discussions on the land use side had to do with whether you might have a privately operated archery range or commercial paintball range, but this deals with none of that. This is a narrow amendment that deals strictly with instructional programs where bows and arrows, paintballs, use of BB guns might be part of an instructional program for youth or adults. And the two exceptions outlined would be for use on city-owned parks as part of an instructional program for Parks and Recreation Department, or by a permit issued by them to have it take place within a park under their supervision. The second exception would allow outdoor discharge as part of instructional programs on accredited educational institutions' property, and that could include USD 305 or private schools, or the St. John's Military School, or Kansas Wesleyan, or K-State Salina. If they wanted to have a instructional or recreational program of instruction that involved the use of any of those items under their supervision, then that could be done within the city limits as part of an instructional program. There should be no direct impact on the city fiscally for this. There is a possibility over time that Parks and Recreation Department may want to have some sort of permit fee for outside parties that might want to use the park for instruction. But the alternatives we've identified is to approve this amendment with the exceptions outlined for Parks and Recreation and educational programs. You could approve the amendment with any additions, deletions, or modifications you think are appropriate. You could refer this item back to staff if you think it needs additional study, or you could decline to approve the amendment if you think the status quo should remain and there should be a citywide prohibition with no exceptions. If you are supportive of creating the exceptions identified for instructional programs as described, then we would recommend adoption of the attached ordinance on first reading. And then we would recommend that emergency be declared, allowing for those ordinance changes to be approved on second reading the same day, and approve the ordinance on second reading.
Any questions of staff?
I just want to say that I'm fairly certain I just signed my 7-year-old up for archery at Lakewood Discovery Center this summer, so I'm glad to see we won't have a bunch of 7- and 8-year-olds in
Arrested.
juvenile hall if this passes, I hope.
We thought it should have a personal touch.
Yeah.
Prudent.
I'm so tempted to add allowing legally shooting of pigeons to this, but there's probably somebody from PETA who would hate me for that.
This has been
While we're
vetted by
going
Parks and Recreation, Police Department, City Attorney, and so this is the narrow exceptions that we've come up with.
Good.
Right. Any other questions or comments of staff? Anybody from the public wanting to speak out on this matter?
What?
Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission for action. Now, Mr. Bingston, we would need 3 separate actions for this one.
Yes, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, I move that we adopt ordinance 12-10638 on first reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt ordinance number 12-10638 on first reading. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries 4-0.
Mayor, I move that the commission declares an emergency exists so that we can proceed with second reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second declaring an emergency action exists for second reading on this matter. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries 4-0.
Mayor, I move we approve ordinance 12-10638 on second reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second of ordinance number 12-10638 to be approved on second reading. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Angel?
Aye.
Commissioner Crawford?
Aye.
Commissioner Householder?
Aye.
Mayor Jennings?
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Do we have any other business?
Commissioners, we do have 2. First of all, I'd like to have Deputy City Manager Mike Scragg very, very briefly. I think he can answer that signal timing question for you, if you'd like that. And then secondly, we will ask that you add an executive session for just 10 minutes for legal purposes, and then we can get you in and get you out with no action.
Okay.
Second question.
Mr. Scragg.
2 things, really. I think the Federal Highway Administration Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices has a logic that may be a little counterintuitive. And the point there is it expects that after the green signal, the green walking signal ends, is when you have ample time to cross the street. If the ample time is provided by the green crossing signal and you happen to step off the curb a couple seconds before it stops, you're stranded. You don't have enough time to cross the street. So that's the core logic that may be a little counterintuitive to the pedestrian that's started under green and it turns to a flashing red quickly. But if I can get the projector to come up. We have signs at each one of the buttons that you would push for the crosswalk that attempt to explain that logic. Under the green walk symbol is when you're to start crossing and watch for vehicles. Under the flashing symbol is when you no longer start crossing the street, but that's when you finish crossing the street. And so the focus really is on that second item, that there's ample time based on the assumed walk speed and the width of the road to be crossed. And then the third one is a solid red hand, which you're not supposed to cross at all. Our signals in general, as well as that particular intersection, are programmed accordingly. And each one of those times is based on the width of the road to be crossed and an assumption about walking speed. So we are compliant with MUTCD. I would, in my review of the Lawrence numbers, they're compliant as well, and I think Mr. Brown's probably correct. Their long green exceeds the requirement, but all that does is lengthen the time it takes to cycle that light for the intersection for vehicle traffic.
So relatively the same amount of cross time provided? I mean, between the two in your analysis, or?
Yeah, part of the issue was the intersection in Lawrence was a 2-lane street where this is a 4-lane. But taking that into account, yes, we had finish time of 5 seconds per lane in Salina and 4.5 seconds per lane in Lawrence.
Yeah. Commissioners, the confusion is that I think Mr. Brown believes that, and he may be correct, that many people believe when they see that shape of a person flashing, that's the only time you're supposed to be in the street. And in fact, that's just intended to tell you it's okay to start walking. That's all it's intended to do. That's a uniform, universal symbol that you'll see across the country. It's, as Mike mentioned, it's the second one. What that one says is don't get into the street now, but finish crossing. And if I'm not mistaken, Mike, the times between Salina and Lawrence are fairly similar. We about a 1 second more total time.
Correct.
We also add more buffer on the don't cross, and that buffer affects the impact of auto traffic. It affects when that allows the traffic to actually start. So if you feel like you truly have gotten trapped because you have the don't cross, we'll give you more time to get out of there. So on the presumption, if the recommendation would be from the citizenry, well, just add more time to that citizen blinking, well, that's all fine and dandy, I suppose, if you start when that when that symbol first comes up, you might feel like you have more time, might feel safer, wouldn't necessarily be. But if you happen to approach the intersection about the time that signal stops flashing, which, that's just depends when you get there. Actually, you still have the same situation, so it doesn't make it any safer at all. It's a little different approach, but we feel when we look at that we actually provide a longer total time, a safer time to cross. Now, there is one way to simplify that for the citizenry altogether, and that's to go with we mentioned last time we had, I think, one intersection that has the countdown numbers where you can actually see the time count down. And I would tell you that is the most simplistic way, but what would be the cost to upgrade for those, Mike, roughly?
I don't know exactly right off the top of my head, but I would imagine is that they're probably in the area of a couple $1,000s per location. We have 3 locations in the city that have the countdown. They are all of our mid-block crossings, so they're actually not really an intersection. They're really a signalized location mid-block. We have 2 of those on Ohio Street and 1 on Crawford.
Yeah.
But several $1,000s.
So the numbers are the best way, but it's also the most expensive way. You'll find the numbers in a lot of the urbanized communities a lot more than you do this. That's why we have the signs, is we recognize those signs came about. I think they've been in place at least 15 years or longer. Oh, yeah. I remember when even the former deputy city manager, we saw those at a conference, and we said, those are really helpful because we're not sure everyone understands the symbols. So we put those beside every button that you push.
Sure.
So this would not be the time to admit that I haven't read the sign, and so this was a lot of good new information.
we put it right by the button.
Okay.
I haven't read it either.
Yeah.
Well, I'm still trying to figure out what it means. No, I'm kidding.
On the countdown, is that like retro cost to retrofit an existing location, or is that like at a new signaled location altogether? It's that much of an upgrade?
We'd have, if you wanted to change those, we'd have to change the heads, the signal head itself.
Okay.
But the wiring's all there, the conduit's there, so it'd be a matter of changing those heads. And I would imagine is that you'd have 4 heads, or actually 8 for each leg of the intersection that you had.
What we could do, if you're interested in that, we could actually get some costs and summarize, bring that back to you.
It'd be interesting to have it. I would just say that, like some of the South 9th work that we did and everything, I might have been a proponent at new construction time to say that's probably worth the upgrade. We're only going to see it increase, and it's maybe a little more user-friendly. So that was maybe more of a question to just bear in mind on the upcoming projects versus retrofitting every intersection that we have out there.
Yeah, I definitely think Crawford in Ohio, maybe Cloud in Ohio, areas where there's residential. The down south area, there's some foot traffic, but not as much residential. But definitely Crawford.
9th and Broadway.
Yeah, 9th. Yeah, there you go. So Crawford and Broadway. There's about 6 to 8 intersections I could think of right away. But again, if it's $20,000 an intersection, the sign sure seem cheaper, but definitely worth looking into.
We'll look at the cost, and I think it does make sense when you're doing a project and you have a whole bid for a large number. Your odds of having a better unit cost are better.
Might be smart.
So we'll take a look at that for you.
Any other questions of staff?
Nope. Mayor, at this time, I'd move to recess into executive session for 10 minutes to discuss with legal counsel matters subject to attorney-client privilege for the reason that public discussion of those matters would waive the privilege and adversely affect the city's interest in the matters, and reconvene at, what is that? There we go. 5:24. Thank you. Wrote it out for me.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn into executive session. All those in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Motion carries. Do we expect any action?
We do not.
Thank you. We're now in executive session.
Europe in exchange for everyone agreeing to hand over sovereignty over their fiscal affairs to Brussels. And now most of these governments, it's not only